I'm joined in studio by Lieutenant Colonel in Reserves Jonathan Conricus, the former international spokesman for the IDF, as well as a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, as well as our I24 News senior Middle East correspondent Ariel Oseran. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us today. A lot of major developments for us to discuss. And Ariel, I want to begin with you as to where things stand at this hour. U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, is said to be heading to Egypt right now. Talks are supposed to be happening in Cairo. Meanwhile, the fighting in Gaza paused. What is happening?
Right. So Cairo is gearing up to host a round of talks to try and really mediate all the outstanding issues that remain with Trump's plan. We remember in Hamas, in their official statement, they said that they're willing to move forward with the immediate release of the hostages under the Trump plan, provided conditions and on the field are met. So that is one of the main topics that are going to be discussed. Hamas has a delegation that is expected to arrive in Cairo this evening with negotiations or talks officially starting tomorrow. Israel is also sending a delegation headed by Strategic Affairs Minister Ron Dermer. Look, I think we have to look at this whole thing of negotiations in two kind of steps. The first step, trying to get this plan implemented, to get it going. Now, for Israel, that is a good development because under the plan, the beginning of its implementation includes the release of all the hostages, which is a significant war goal, but also for the Israeli public, that is what the majority want to see now. But there's also the negotiations for what will happen later, what will happen with the technocratic committee, what will happen with the disarmament of Hamas, which is something that they didn't really address in their official statement. But I think in order to get the ball rolling, the sides need to hash out the terms of the release of the hostages, and then they'll move on to talk about the other issues. And again, for Israel, this is a positive development. Ultimately, there is some apprehension that Hamas may try and cheat or extend the terms that are existent. But when you have the Muslim Brotherhood, you could say corporate for Hamas, commending them for agreeing to this deal, this kind of puts Hamas in a situation where it can't now refuse or really break down the talks. But again, with Hamas, anything could happen.
Hamas, anything could happen, as Ariel just stated. They're known for getting these negotiations to start and then dragging them up. Right now, also, these negotiations are happening not necessarily under Israel's conditions. They are not on the offensive. This is the Israeli government had wanted these negotiations to continue happening while Hamas was directly under fire in Gaza City. That's not happening right now, though, Jonathan. Does that impact anything that could be happening in Cairo?
I think it does, and I think it's very important that the clock starts ticking now as of 3 a.m. when Israel was asked and then indeed complied with that. When President Trump asked Israel, you can talk about semantics, to cease firing, Israel has indeed significantly reduced offensive operations, and it's some use of fire, but it's mostly defensive. But that needs to be the beginning of 72 hours. And then 72 hours, from within those 72 hours, all of the hostages should be released as per the Trump deal. I think the first litmus test will be whether or not Qatar and the Egyptians will influence President Trump enough to allow Hamas to wiggle out of those 72 hours. That'll be the first test. If that happens, that'll be a major fork in the road for Israeli negotiators to say, okay, is this serious or isn't it serious? I think that the price or basically the entry fee that Hamas has paid here in order to prevent a situation, avert a situation where they are violating President Trump's ultimatum, is to say, okay, we're willing to hand over the hostages, of course, with the caveats that Ariel mentioned here. Israel needs to hold them to that, and Israel needs to hold Qatari and Egyptian, and most importantly, Hamas feet to the fire, and make sure that indeed within those 72 hours, maximum pressure on Hamas so that first things first, get hostages back. If Hamas is able to wiggle out of that and to extend and use the different techniques that we've seen them use and the manipulations that we've seen them do in the past, that will be a sign of trouble, which I hope that we won't get into.
I think these are the critical days, and the positive aspect of this plan, the fact that all of the hostages need to be released in this window, these 72 hours that you're mentioning.
Yes, and as that is happening, IDF is deployed on the ground, ready to continue to apply significant kinetic pressure on Hamas. And while I was very disappointed to see that Qatar already got a strategic benefit from the US, the presidential decree of just a little bit short of a defense treaty between the US and Qatar. I regret seeing that, because that means that that was the incentive for the Qataris. I don't know what the Turks and the Egyptians are vying for, but I hope that anything given to them by the Americans will only be given after the US, President Trump, and Israel gets in return what Trump stipulated in his plan. And that is for Hamas to be disarmed and for Hamas not to have any power and influence over the situation in Gaza at the end of these negotiations. If Turkey gets F-35s before, or if the Egyptians get additional money, additional weapons, weapon systems, or military aid before we have anything tangible, then that'll be a win for them. Maybe the Egyptians and the Turks aren't as savvy as the Qataris. We'll see. But definitely very, very important days coming up. And we'll see how really the pressure can be applied and maintained on Hamas to release hostages.
Ariel.
Yeah, also you asked as to the situation on the ground. So as Jonathan precisely described it, there isn't a complete ceasefire in place right now. There is still Israeli, Gazan reports of Israeli strikes from attack helicopter in northeast Gaza City, artillery shelling in west Gaza City. We are not seeing the massive high-rises being destroyed or advancement of ground forces. So this fire can be labeled as defensive fire, but it's not that there's complete silence over the Gaza Strip. This is obviously something that Hamas would like to see. They would like to see an end to the reconnaissance flights of drones over Gaza City. That is not happening right now. And I think for Israel, it doesn't want to create a precedent where it is ceasing the fire without anything tangible in its hands, but also moving forward, it doesn't want to, for example, see the beginning of reconstruction before the hostages are back. So there's many points in the road that Israel wants to achieve before moving forward. It will not agree, in my assessment, to a complete cessation of any strikes, including defensive strikes, until there is a clear time frame put in place with commitments for the release of the hostages.
Jonathan, a quick statement.
Yeah, just a quick follow-up on that. And I think it's important to understand the situation that Hamas is in. And while we know that they are cynical and savvy and extremely cruel and manipulative, they are also under pressure. They're under pressure for the first time. Arab countries that are teaming up with President Trump and applying pressure. Their main state sponsors of terrorism, Qatar, Egypt, Turkey, are for the first time on board with a plan that says Hamas has no role in the future of governing Gaza. They need to return the hostages and to disarm. That's the first. But maybe more importantly, and a little bit underreported, is the situation in the southern part of the Gaza Strip, where for the first time, Hamas operatives were executed or killed, 25 of them, in Khan Yunis just a day and a half ago. It was publicly done. The bodies were on display. And for the first time, we have families, large clans in southern Gaza who are rising up, uniting and saying to Hamas, your days are done and you're not going to govern Khan Yunis anymore. That is also of significance.
The major developments that we're having. These are decisive days for a deal. That is the message from the Hostage Families Forum as they push for the Israeli public to also gather today at Hostages Square in Tel Aviv and rally behind President Trump's peace plan. The Israeli public healing, especially, it's hard to believe, 2 years since the October 7th massacre when Romi was kidnapped, when 250 plus Israelis were kidnapped to Gaza. The fact that this is all happening right now, can the Israeli public begin to heal right now as these talks are continuing to happen, or they need to go through? There's still a chance that this could fall through.
No, I think Hamas is watching, the Qataris are watching, and they understand very well the workings of the Jewish soul, the Israeli soul, Israeli politics. And they understand that this is our soft spot. They understand that our love for our brothers and sisters and our commitment to get them home, all of them home, is our, in their sense, in their eyes, our weakness. And I think they have done everything they could, and they will continue to do everything they can to manipulate that and to leverage that against Israel in order to basically survive this war that they started on October 7. And what Israel needs to do is to, on one hand, negotiate and get the hostages out as quickly as possible, because getting them back is a condition for winning. I don't see victory against Gaza with Israelis still held in Hamas captivity. But on the other hand, keeping a clear focus on the strategic long-term objectives and to make sure that we bargain hard for everything and continue to apply pressure on Hamas, not to allow them to wiggle away and to get sidetracked only by getting hostages back. It's first and foremost hostages, and then it is all of the rest, the long-term things. It is restructuring the Gaza Strip. It is education there. It is disarmament of Hamas. It is who will govern the Gaza Strip. These are things that, yes, on a human level, our emotions will go to seeing our brothers and sisters brought home to their families. That's super important. But the follow-up is extremely important to make sure that this opportunity of pressure on Hamas isn't wasted and that we indeed shape the future in a positive way.
Ariel, before we go out for a break, just what is the latest that we are hearing from Hamas itself?
Well, again, they're saying that conditions on the ground need to be met to allow them to carry out this release of hostages in 72 hours. They are also saying that while they did agree to the release of hostages, again, under certain conditions, they didn't accept Trump's proposal in its entirety. And mainly they will need to further negotiate the issues of post-war governance, the reconstruction of the Gaza Strip, disarmament. But it does seem that the way President Trump presented this deal is that without the release of the hostages at the beginning, this is somewhat of a precondition, you could say, for the implementation of the rest of the deal. And that is very important for Israelis, for the families of the hostages, that they have the leader of the world's largest, strongest superpower in their corner, pushing for the swift release of their loved ones.
Crucial days and hours ahead. Ariel Oseran, Lieutenant Colonel in Reserves Jonathan Conricus, and Mirav Leshem Gonen, thank you so much.